She almost turned back at the door. The golden lights of the restaurant shimmered against the glass, warm and inviting to everyone who believed they belonged inside. But for Maricela Vaughn, the glow felt like a test she had failed too many times before. Her reflection stared back at her, carefully curled chestnut hair, emerald dress chosen after an hour of doubt, shoulders squared with fragile determination. Tonight was not about romance. It was not about luxury. It was about dignity. She came to dinner hoping for respect, not another disappointment. Before we step further into her story, take a moment. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, in the quiet strength of people who keep showing up despite being hurt, please like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Stories like this connect hearts across the world. Maricela inhaled slowly and pushed the door open. The restaurant buzzed with low laughter and the soft clink of wine glasses. Brick walls framed shelves of bottles glowing amber beneath hanging lights. Couples leaned toward one another in easy conversation. A musician in the corner strummed something slow and thoughtful. It was the kind of place where people celebrated anniversaries and promotions. The kind of place where people felt seen. And she had once believed she would feel seen here too. At the table near the center sat Callan Rhodes, already nursing a glass of red wine. He wore confidence like a tailored jacket, sharp, effortless, practiced. His dark hair was swept neatly back, and his expression carried the faint impatience of someone who disliked waiting. When he spotted her, he lifted a hand in acknowledgement, not warmth. She walked toward him with a careful smile, reminding herself why she had agreed to come. 3 years of partnership in business. 1 year of something almost romantic, but never fully defined. Countless dinners where she had swallowed small slights for the sake of keeping peace. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight he had asked her to meet because he had something important to discuss. The words had lingered in her chest all afternoon like fragile hope. She wanted respect. She wanted acknowledgement of her contribution to the company they had built from scratch. She wanted him to look at her not as an accessory, not as a convenient mind behind the scenes, but as an equal. She sat down across from him, smoothing her dress under the table, heart steady but guarded. Maricela had not always been so cautious. Growing up in a modest home above her mother's bakery, she learned early that love was loud and effort was visible. Her mother worked before sunrise, hands dusted in flour, humming softly as she kneaded dough. Her father had left when Maricela was 9, promising visits that became postcards, then silence. Her mother never spoke bitterly about him. Instead, she taught her daughter that worth was something you carried inside, not something someone else handed you. But life has a way of testing the lessons we inherit. When Maricela met Callan at a local entrepreneurship seminar, she had been drawn to his ambition. He saw possibilities in her ideas that others overlooked. Together, they launched a digital marketing firm from her tiny apartment kitchen table. She handled strategy and creative direction. He handled clients and networking. They worked late nights, fueled by cheap takeout and dreams of independence. In those early months, respect flowed naturally between them. He listened when she spoke. He credited her during presentations. He leaned on her instincts. Success came faster than either expected, and with it came attention. Bigger clients, invitations to high-end events, articles mentioning Callan Rhodes as the visionary founder. The articles rarely mentioned Maricela Vaughn. At first, she brushed it off as oversight. He promised he would correct it. He said publicity teams sometimes simplified narratives. But slowly, the dynamic shifted. In meetings, he began speaking over her. When she suggested bold strategies, he repackaged them in his own words minutes later, earning nods of approval. At networking dinners, he introduced her as the creative support rather than co-founder. Each slight was small enough to dismiss individually. Together, they formed a pattern she could no longer ignore. Tonight, she hoped that pattern would break. The waiter arrived, polite and attentive. Callan ordered for both of them without asking her preference, assuming she would want the usual. She smiled faintly and let it pass, though she had been craving something entirely different. He launched into talk about a potential merger with a larger firm. He described growth projections, expansion into international markets, the prestige of aligning with established investors. His voice carried excitement, but it never paused long enough for her thoughts to settle. Maricela listened, fingers wrapped around her water glass. She waited for him to say what this meant for them, what it meant for her. When he finally addressed the important discussion, it came casually, almost as an afterthought woven between bites of food. The investors, he explained, were more comfortable dealing with a single visible leader. The branding would need streamlining, titles would be adjusted, he would step fully into the CEO role publicly. She could remain head of creative operations, behind the scenes, where her talents were strongest, behind the scenes. The words landed like a stone in her chest. He framed it as strategy, not demotion. He spoke of optics and market perception. He assured her it did not diminish her value. But he never once asked how she felt. The restaurant noise blurred around her. She thought of the nights she had stayed awake redesigning campaigns, the risks she had taken when clients doubted them, the savings she had poured into launching the company when no bank would offer a loan. She thought of her mother's tired hands and the promise she made to herself never to shrink for someone else's comfort. This was not about ego. It was about acknowledgement. Maricela placed her napkin gently on the table and met his eyes. She did not raise her voice. She did not accuse. She simply spoke with clarity that surprised even her. She reminded him that they had built this together. She reminded him that partnership required visibility and trust. She told him she would not disappear into shadows to make others comfortable. For a flicker of a moment, Callan looked unsettled. Then defensiveness hardened his expression. He spoke of practicality, of not letting emotions interfere with opportunity. He implied she was being sensitive. He suggested she should be grateful for stability. Grateful. The word ignited something quiet but fierce within her. Maricela realized then that she had not come seeking romance or validation from a man who no longer saw her. She had come seeking respect from someone who had forgotten how to give it. And she would not beg for it. The rest of the dinner unfolded with brittle politeness. The wine remained half-finished. The music in the corner shifted to something more upbeat, mocking the heaviness at their table. When the check arrived, he reached for it automatically, a small assertion of control. She placed her card down beside his, meeting his eyes without flinching. Outside, the night air felt cooler than before. She walked away from the restaurant without looking back, heels striking pavement in steady rhythm. Each step carried equal parts grief and liberation. For days afterward, silence settled between them at the office. Emails replaced conversations. Meetings were brief and clinical. Word spread about the potential merger, and employees sensed tension. Some gravitated toward Callan's authority. Others watched Maricela with quiet loyalty. At home, she lay awake replaying the dinner in her mind. Doubt crept in during the darkest hours. Was she sabotaging their growth? Was she allowing pride to cloud judgment? She thought of her mother again, of the bakery filled with early morning light. Respect, her mother had once said, is not loud. It is consistent. Callan's respect had become conditional. A week later, the investors requested a formal presentation from both founders before finalizing terms. Maricela almost declined, considering stepping away entirely, but something inside urged her not to surrender her place at the table so easily. The presentation day arrived in a sleek glass office tower overlooking the city. The boardroom gleamed with polished wood and panoramic views. Investors in tailored suits reviewed documents with analytical detachment. Callan spoke first, charismatic and polished as ever. He outlined growth metrics and future projections with confidence. Then it was Maricela's turn. She rose slowly, pulse steady but strong. Instead of rehearsed lines, she spoke from lived experience. She described the company's foundation, the nights spent studying market behavior, the creative risks that differentiated them from competitors, the team culture built on collaboration rather than hierarchy. She spoke of vision not as a singular spotlight, but as shared brilliance. The room shifted, investors leaned forward, questions followed, not just for Callan, but for her. Strategic questions, operational questions. They wanted to understand her methodology. They wanted her perspective on scaling without losing authenticity. For the first time in months, she felt visible. After the meeting, as they rode the elevator down, silence stretched between them again. But this time, it was heavier with realization. Callan's composure wavered slightly. He admitted the investors had responded strongly to her insights. He acknowledged that the narrative of a single leader might not be as appealing as he assumed. It was not an apology. Not yet. But it was a crack in the armor. Over the next several days, discussions continued. The investors proposed a structure that preserved both founders as equal partners publicly. They emphasized that modern companies thrived on diverse leadership rather than outdated hierarchies. Callan faced a choice: adapt or cling to ego. Maricela faced her own choice: remain if respect became genuine, or walk away if it did not. One evening, he asked to meet again, not at a lavish restaurant, but at the modest cafe where they had first sketched business plans years ago. The setting felt symbolic, simpler, honest. He looked different this time, less polished, more human. He admitted he had let ambition distort perspective. He confessed that public praise had fueled insecurities he did not know he carried. He acknowledged that in trying to secure control, he had risked losing partnership. Maricela listened carefully. Words were easy, patterns were harder to break. She told him that respect was not demonstrated in grand gestures, but in daily behavior. It was in introductions, in shared credit, in listening without interruption. It was in recognizing strength rather than fearing it. He did not argue. Change did not happen overnight. There were awkward moments in meetings where he caught himself before speaking over her. There were press releases revised to include both their names prominently. There were internal conversations about company culture shifting toward transparency. Some employees noticed and felt encouraged. Others remained skeptical. Trust, once fractured, requires time to rebuild. Maricela found herself growing stronger through the process. She began mentoring young women in entrepreneurship, sharing lessons about boundaries and self-worth. She visited her mother more often, helping in the bakery at dawn, remembering the foundation from which she came. Months later, the merger finalized under equitable terms. At the celebratory event, Callan stepped to the podium. The room quieted, cameras flashing. He spoke of growth and gratitude. Then he paused, scanning the crowd until his gaze found Maricela. He publicly credited her as co-founder, visionary, and the heart of their success. He detailed specific contributions she had made, acknowledging that without her, the company would not exist. Applause filled the room. It was not the applause that moved her. It was the sincerity in his voice. Later that evening, as guests mingled beneath sparkling lights, Maricela stepped outside for fresh air. The city stretched before her, alive and unpredictable. She realized that respect had not arrived as a gift from someone else. It had begun the moment she refused to accept less than she deserved. She had walked into that first dinner hoping not to be diminished. She had walked out understanding she would never allow it again. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who might need encouragement, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories reach people who may be fighting silent battles of their own. And before we reach the final lines, I have a special request for you. Comment the word respect below if you believe every person deserves to be valued without having to beg for it. In the years that followed, the company flourished. Challenges still arose: economic downturns, competitive pressures, personal disagreements, but the foundation had shifted. Maricela no longer measured her worth by someone else's acknowledgement. She measured it by alignment with her own values. She and Callan maintained a partnership rooted in clearer boundaries. Whether their connection would ever evolve into romance again remained uncertain. But that uncertainty no longer defined her happiness. One quiet evening, long after the merger celebration had faded into memory, Maricela returned to that same restaurant where disappointment once threatened to shrink her spirit. She reserved a table for one. The brick walls glowed as warmly as before. The music drifted softly through the air. This time, she did not hesitate at the door. She ordered exactly what she wanted. She savored each bite slowly. She watched couples around her and felt no envy, only peace. The place that once symbolized dismissal now symbolized resilience. Respect had not been handed to her across a candlelit table. She had claimed it by standing up when it mattered most. And sometimes, the most powerful transformation is not convincing someone else to change, but discovering you were strong enough all along. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own quiet battles or someone you love who deserves better, please engage with this video. Like, comment, share, and let us know your thoughts. Your interaction keeps stories of courage and second chances alive. Because somewhere tonight, someone is walking into a room hoping to be respected. And maybe, just maybe, they will find the strength to demand it.